Namaskar. This is David Hawthorne at astroview.com. Today is the 14th of October 2022. I just wanted to give a short comment or two on the current situation for Donald Trump. Now, I am using the systems approach to Vedic astrology as the scientific paradigm for reading horoscopes. We see that he is in Guru Mahadasha, Jupiter main period, which is favorable for his chart. It rules investments, his mind, education, children. It is well placed in Virgo, ruled by a well-placed Mercury. We do go to the Antradasha, the sub-period ruler, for the operating planet, and this is Bud, Mercury, at 15 degrees, in its own sign of Gemini, which is quite favorable. But we also know, using systems approach, that all significant events in life are connected with the transits of the planets. The transits can even supersede the dashas. So several important notes here. Guru is Mahadasha ruler, which runs until November 2032. Since this past April, entered Pisces, which is its own sign, which is favorable for 9 rising signs. It's not favorable for Leo because Jupiter is in Pisces. Take this Jupiter, slide him over here. He's in the 8th house. Now we know that of these 12 houses, from the 1st house around through to the 12th house, only 9 of them are actually favorable houses. 3 houses in every horoscope are called Dustan Babas, inauspicious houses. The 6th house, the 8th house, and the 12th house. Planets in the birth chart in the 6th, 8th, or 12th become weak. So he has a weak Venus ruling his wife and female women, females in his life, like sisters, and his niece, I think, is very upset with him. And he's had several wives, 12 houses, losses, expenses, and separations. And Venus rules his own self-efforts, his own self-initiatives, and communications. He's always getting himself in trouble with his communications. Saturn and Venus for this chart are friends. For the Leo rising sign, we say 6 planets will never cause harm. Sun ruling the chart, Mars ruling father and Guru, Mercury ruling wealth and status and family life. Usually when this 2nd house ruler is in the 11th house, the person gains money from their own family. Mars will never cause harm. It rules the 9th house of good fortune, in Dharma, Guru, and father. So we have a very close connection with his father. Both are involved in property or real estate, Mars. This also gives Donald Trump good executive organizing skills connected with property. Jupiter will never cause harm, ruling his 5th house of mind, investments, and children. And Saturn will never cause harm, will never cause the dreaded Sadi Sati. That's the 2.5 years when Saturn transits before the moon, 2.5 years on the moon, 2.5 years after the moon. And Venus would never cause harm. It rules the 3rd house of self-initiatives, independent projects, and entrepreneurial ventures will never cause harm. But Saturn and Venus are both in the 12th house, at Dustan Baba. They're weak. Weak Saturn causes worry, fear, impatience, and distrust of others. Trouble with the physical structure as well. Saturn rules the house of marriage. Seventh house, marriage. Seventh house is opposite the first house. This is self. This is others. So marriage, relationships, partnerships, joint ventures. And it's placed in the 12th house of losses and expenses and separation. So he's always losing money in partnerships and relationships relative to wife and women. He's had many women accuse him of misbehavior, sexual harassment. So any planet transiting the 6th, 8th, and 12th become weak. So Jupiter ruling his mind, ruling investments, and Jupiter ruling law, L-A-W, justice, is in Adustan Bhava, in the 8th house. 8th house is called Randra, so it's transformations and vulnerability. So he's vulnerable to law issues, vulnerable to law and justice. So Jupiter came into this Pisces in the middle of April, and it will be here till the middle of April 2023. So his Mahadasha ruler Jupiter is absolutely vulnerable in this house. Now there's a little bit of support for him because this is retrograde at 7 degrees. It'll go down 654. It will stay in the 4-degree range and then go direct, come out of retrograde motion and go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The reason that's favorable for him is because his most effective point, his rising sign degree, is about 7 degrees. And anytime any planet, either in the birth chart or in the transit chart, are close to a person's rising sign degree, we call that most effective point of every house. And it's about a 5-degree orb, so it starts at 1 degree, goes up to 11 degrees. My experience is 3 degrees or less, you definitely have an impact. So Jupiter, even though he's weak in this house, he does cast a favorable aspect 5, 7, and 9 houses from it. So that's a little helpful. But mostly it's false hope. It can't give him a lot of strength because he's vulnerable to begin with. There's no power in the 8th house. So things will get better for him in the middle of April in terms of Jupiter. The other very important transit is Shani. Saturn is currently at 24 degrees in Capricorn, and it rules the 7th house of relationships, partnerships, joint ventures, marriage. And where is Saturn? It's in Capricorn. Take this Saturn, slide him over here. Yes, people will say, oh, Saturn's in his own sign of Capricorn, just like Jupiter is in his own sign of Pisces. But are these favorable houses? No, these are Dustan Bhavas, inauspicious houses. So Saturn ruling relationships is in the 6th house, which is called Ari, which is enemies, disputes, litigation, bankruptcy, divorce. Not a favorable house. Well, Saturn's actually been in this house for about 2 years. So there's been a lot of stress for him for the last 2 years, since he lost the election about 2 years ago. Now Saturn will move into the favorable 7th house around January the 17th. Then he will get support for 2 years and 2 months, because Saturn here would become a Panch Mahapurush Yoga, one of the 5 great yogas. That'll be helpful. However, before Saturn gets here, he's going to have a lot of trouble. Because he's retrograde 24 degrees, he will not get less than 24 degrees. When he comes out of 24, he'll go 25, 26, 27, 28, 29 before pulling into here. Why is that a problem? Is because, see this Rahu here at 27 degrees? He throws an aspect 5, 7, and 9 houses away. So Rahu will closely, it's already causing trouble. It's within a 5-degree orb. So it would go down to 22. This is 24. It won't get less than 24. So then it's going to go 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. Until it gets here, he's in trouble. Because Rahu's unexpected calamities, it's an eclipse relative to relationships, partnerships, joint ventures. So I think a lot of his close associates are going to come under stress, and they'll have nothing other to do than to try to protect themselves. So I think a lot of people are going to come forward and let the country know that Trump was causing trouble. This will cause a lot of worry and fear, impatience, distrust, anger. Now Saturn gets here in January, late January, but it'll take probably till close to March before it gets 5 degrees and gets strong. But until then, there's trouble. Now there's one other transit I want to talk about, but first I want to just mention something about his basic chart. This is one of the reasons that I thought that he did not have an ideal chart to be president of the United States. And it's because for Leo rising sign, Chandra, the moon, rules the 12th house, Adustan Baba. So moon becomes most malefic planet for Leo. And moon is in its debilitation sign. And moon is afflicted by Ketu and Rahu. This causes an eclipse of the heart. And sun is Atmakaraka, significator for the soul, and Rahu and Ketu are also afflicting sun. So I consider this an eclipse of the heart and soul. Usually when somebody has a debilitated and afflicted moon, other people do not know where they are emotionally. They can intimidate people, but they don't know how to handle their emotions and how to interact with other people. So Rahu and Ketu afflict his moon, Rahu and Ketu afflict his sun, and moon, the most malefic planet, 7th aspect, also afflicts the sun. So I've all along predicted that the real problem for Donald Trump is going to be with his heart, meaning cardiovascular issues. Both sun and moon are connected with the heart. So his saving grace in this chart was the well-placed Mars in the 1st house. Brings good fortune, connected with father, and property. Because Mars is close to the most effective point, its 4th, 7th, and 8th aspects give some support for property, marriage and partnerships, and windfalls and inheritance, easy money. Jupiter gives us good success here. He had good education. He has a number of children. Investments, ruled by Mercury in the house of gains and income and friendships. So these three, Mercury, Mars, and Jupiter, are carrying the chart. But Sun, Moon, Venus, and Saturn are utterly weak. These are Sun and Moon are flat tires on his bus of life. Saturn and Venus are tires that are low in air. So the other very important transit going on is with Mars. Mars rules good fortune, his Dharma. It's at 29 degrees today in Taurus. He's about to move into Gemini for a few weeks, but he's going to go retrograde and come back into this house. So Mars, which is also executive skills, it's also the police, FBI, national security, national intelligence. So look what happened here. Mars came into Taurus a few months ago. And recently it had to go over Rahu under the affliction of Ketu and Moon, and over Sun, where it was combust. So let me show you these dates when this started and when this will be finished. But until it's over with, there's going to be trouble, in my opinion. So this is the birth chart. This inner circle is the transit chart. I'm sorry, I misspoke. This is the birth chart. This inner circle is the birth chart. It's just the circular format. It's the outer circle that's the transit chart. So 3 ways to look at transits. Transit planets can impact each other. Transit planets can impact natal planets. Natal planets can impact transit planets. So let's go back in time. We're going to see this Mars go over that Rahu and Ketu. So this is around September 21st. Some real stress started coming into his life. And this is for, in terms of weeks, 1, 2, 3, 4. Even when he goes into Gemini, he's still only 3 degrees from Rahu and Ketu and 2 degrees from Moon. Lines don't mean anything. There's no lines in the zodiac. This is an imaginary line. You go by degrees. So this is still close. He only gets to 1 degree before going retrograde, so he's going to come back over these 4 planets in November, around the midterms. A lot of stress here. And that goes for the entire month of November. Then some relief in December as he pulls away from these before coming back the 3rd time next year. So this would be in February. He's going to come back over here. Now let's take a look at November 5th, 2024, the election. Well, problem is he's okay with the Mercury subperiod to some extent. Now Mercury, of course, is a fast-moving planet. The 2 fastest are Moon and Mercury. So they're usually not stable, because Mercury will generally be in Capricorn, Pisces, or Cancer for him, which are the Dustan Bhavas, or will be under the affliction of Rahu or Ketu by aspect or conjunction. So anytime Mercury is in the even signs, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, it will come under a repeated aspect or affliction by Rahu and Ketu. And anytime Mercury's in Scorpio or Taurus, it will come under the Moon affliction. So Mercury doesn't give a lot of stability. Now next October, a year from now, he goes into a Ketu subperiod. This is not going to be a good subperiod for him. Just from a year before the election up to close to the election, he'll be in Ketu. Well, Ketu afflicts Moon, Ketu afflicts Sun. If Ketu is operating, so is Rahu afflicting Sun and Moon. And Moon afflicts Sun. I don't think it's going to be a good subperiod for him. Then in September, just before the election, he goes into Venus. Where's Venus? In the 12th house of losses. So I'm not sure he's going to be in a position to run. I think if this legal thing gets real serious for him, and I believe it will, then I think they will revoke his right to run for office. So either that will happen, or he might decide not to run at all. See, I personally think that would have been good for him he was a very wealthy man with a lot of power, and I just think that that would have been a good thing for him to do, is just to be private, stay a private citizen. It's the same thing with Putin. Putin's a multi-billionaire, and instead of just retiring and enjoying his life and helping other people, he starts a war. So I think when a person's ego gets involved, you can get them in trouble. By the way, really interesting thing about our elections. Every year between the middle of October and the middle of November, Sun, ruling the government, will always be in Libra, which is its debilitation sign. We've had trouble with almost every election I've ever seen since I've been a kid. There's been trouble with elections, and they get worse and worse every year, especially if Rahu or Ketu are involved. I've always advocated for us to run our elections either, and ideally the best would be, in my opinion, would be middle of August to middle of September when Sun's in Leo. See, Sun in Leo is codependent on nobody. That's his own Multrikon sign. He's very powerful. It's the most powerful position of Sun. It's more powerful than exalted Sun. A guy comes into my office and says, "Oh, I have an exalted Sun. Isn't that great?" Well, maybe, maybe not. Sun in Aries is codependent on the strength of its dispositor, which is Mars. So what if Mars is in a Dustan Baba, the 6th, 8th, or 12th house? What if Mars is afflicted? What if Mars is debilitated? Well, then that undermines the strength of Sun, because planets are codependent on the strength of their dispositor, their landlord. Well, Sun in Leo is codependent on nobody. He loves it. So I would say middle of August to middle of September, much, much better time for national elections. My second choice would be when Sun is exalted, which is always middle of April to middle of May. I assume most of you know why they picked November for the elections. It had to do with farming, because they wanted to wait till the crops were all brought in October, and they wanted to get the elections before winter set in December. That's why they chose that time. But Sun's debilitated. It rules the government. So on the election, Jupiter will be afflicted by Rahu and Ketu and Moon. Jupiter will be 25 degrees. So Moon, Ketu, and Rahu will be afflicting Jupiter transiting this house. Mars, ruling good fortune, will be debilitated, and Dharma. Venus will be afflicted by Rahu, Ketu, and Moon. And Mercury will be afflicted. Mercury in Scorpio will be at 10 degrees. So that means it'll come under Rahu in Pisces at 11 degrees. Throws an aspect 5, 7, and 9. So it will be afflicting Mercury right here. This Rahu will be afflicting this Mercury, which is wealth and status and family life. That's an eclipse. Venus, the operating planet, which in the natal charts in the house of losses, will be afflicted by Rahu, Ketu, and Chandra, the most malefic planet. So A, I don't think he's going to run for whatever reason, and B, I don't think he could win. Okay, I hope these points are helpful.